Hello and welcome to the CNBC-TV18 special show here from Davos 2022. I'm Shireen Bhan. We continue our coverage here as we speak with global leaders on what the world looks like in light of the many challenges that we're faced with. It is my pleasure now to welcome our very first India panel. Joining me today, Dinesh Khara, the Chairman of State Bank of India, Tapan Singhel of Bajaj Allianz, and of course representing the startup ecosystem, Ritesh Agarwal. Gentlemen, thanks very much for joining us here on CNBC-TV18. It's very, very clear. The temperature is hot. The mood is cold, Mr. Khara, when we talk about the global economy at this point in time. India, of course, relatively better positioned, and overnight we saw big decisions being taken by the government to try and rein in inflation with a significant cut in excise duty and customs duties as well. How significant is that likely to be going forward on inflation?
I think it's a very welcome move, and which has been introduced at a very right and opportune time. Generally, the inflation in India is more of an imported inflation, which is essentially attributed to the crude oil and also edible oil. Whereas edible oil is getting addressed to a greater extent because of the import relaxations, which have now been export relaxations, which have been permitted by both the countries which are the major producers. And when it comes to the fuel-led inflation, which is essentially, I think it's a very, fuel-led inflation is essentially on account of the imported crude. So to the extent possible, Government of India has taken a very, very pragmatic step in terms of reducing the excise, which will go a long way, though in terms of the loss to the exchequer, it is almost about 1 trillion Indian rupees. But I would say that the kind of support it will lend to the economic activity, probably that can be recouped in no time with the economic growth, which will probably be induced by this kind of a measure. So I think I would say that it's a very welcome move as far as Indian economy is concerned, because otherwise our economy is very well placed in terms of the capacity utilization. It is somewhere around 72%. So there are hardly any supply side constraints which are there. It was only essentially cost push inflation which was coming from fuel, which has been addressed to a greater extent. So that's my take. So
it will benefit as far as the consumption story is concerned. But you talked about the revenue foregone, and it's a fairly large number of over 1 lakh crore rupees. In light of all of the measures that have been taken, the possibility of additional government borrowing and the pressure that could put, if they were to go to that extent, I don't know if they will, but if it were to be an additional 1 lakh crore rupee borrowing, I would rather say that the kind of traction which we have seen for the GST collection, it has been very, very encouraging. And if the economic activity gets further enhanced, it will lead to much better collections on the GST, which will actually help us help the government in overcoming this kind of a deficit which will probably come. Yes, and that decision is yet to be taken, so there's only so much that we can speculate on that front. But Tapan, let me ask you, at this point in time, as we pointed out, India relatively better positioned, but what's the sense that you get in terms of, what the expectation is a couple of months as hopefully this volatility starts to ease?
So if you look at globally, like you said, I think that is not a concern. And as Mr. Khan rightly pointed out, my personal feeling is India is in the right traction. So I've seen many ups and downs. I've seen a lot of expectation of India move up very strongly at times. Then there's huge down. People have not given up. But if you look at it, remove the spikes. Consistently, India has been slugging forward. It never happened that if you take a 2 or 3 year frame, you find that India has really missed something or really gone over the board. I think a question of expectations mismatch which keeps on happening over time. So my personal expectation is India will keep on moving forward. It will keep on moving in the right direction. It will keep on correcting course like the one that we just talked about. It will be going in the right direction. So the India story is something which is there for long term, and it keeps on moving on. That is my expectation. I feel this is going to be in the right direction as it progresses further.
That certainly is the hope. Ritesh Agarwal, you've got a smile on your face. Finally, things are looking up as far as the hospitality sector is concerned after the COVID pandemic has now started to recede, and, people are traveling again, people are holidaying again. Europe seems like it's completely booked out at this point in time. So that's the good news. But then the bad news is that you've now got a situation where the kind of checks that were being written are probably not going to be written. So on balance, how do you feel today?
So first off, I feel very excited. Like I mentioned to you, last time we spoke was in the middle of COVID-19, as you remember. I think the point of Delta wave. And it was very hard on the travel and hospitality industry. There's no qualms I have in sharing that. But it in some way, in my view, helped the travel and hospitality industry, right? Because we were able to redesign our cost structures, use technology like never before, which are now helping us prepare for the future growth. Clearly, business is coming back with vengeance. Globally, almost every travel company in the times of slowdown are actually growing 50% plus in gross booking volumes. Of course, we at OYO are seeing something similar or better. We have business in India and in different parts of the world. In India, I think on the Easter weekend, we did over 8 lakh bookings and have done more than that every week ever since, including yesterday. So it just shows that travel in India is coming back very strong, as in Europe, by the way. In Europe, our bookings are at the highest I have ever since pandemic or even before that. So that's a good news. Travel is coming back and people are willing to spend more on experiences than just on products. Because for 2 years, people just could not spend on experiences anymore. On the other hand, clearly in the startup world, as you can imagine, there's, on Twitter and on social media, you see every venture capital firm having a perspective of this slowdown and companies to prepare for it. My view is that for companies, this is a great opportunity, right? Think of it like the 2 years of COVID for us. These are 2 years which were tough, very hard on us, granted. But it allowed us to build character. It allowed us to build the right cost structure, right business structure, right growth structure. So I hope that, as they always say, in slowdown is when the best companies are built. I'm sure many startups will be built to become very sustainable, long-term successful businesses during these times.
Well, that certainly is the hope. But in the short term, there are significant uncertainties that many are dealing with. And speaking of one, as far as the IPO is concerned, what's the plan going ahead? Because many are looking at reviewing their IPO plans. What about you?
So look, I think first off, as you know, we are on file as we speak with the regulator. I think we have two views. The first one is we are continuing to keep our eyes and ears open. Naturally, there is global market uncertainty on one side, but on the other hand, our performance continues to get stronger. So at this point of time, we're still keeping our eyes open and seeing what's the right time to make a decision. But I want to re-clarify that we have not stopped our plans. As and when we have a clear timeline, I'll make sure that we come back.
But have you heard back from SEBI in terms of the clearance? Yeah?
Our banks continue to engage with the regulator on that.
Okay, so no decision yet on calling it off, but no decision yet on taking it forward either. So you're somewhere in the middle.
For now, we are just enjoying the summers and the bookings that come along.
Okay, but Mr. Khara, this is what I want to address with you. The kind of volatility that we are seeing, and we're starting to see it impact the startup ecosystem already. We've seen many companies announce their plans of laying off, etc. Do you see this pain getting worse as things progress, given the global, change in sentiment, especially within the VC community, etc.?
We have actually not seen any such adverse impact on the businesses whom we are supporting. I would rather say that they may be a very small proportion which we are hearing, but they may not be representing the real economy per se. So I think the economy per se has got a huge opportunity for growth. So naturally, if at all there are some layoffs, etc., such people can always be absorbed with the sectors where we are seeing the growth. And invariably, the skills which such people possess has got the marketability too. So I don't expect that it is likely to be
on the MSME side as well?
No way.
No pain that you're seeing at
we
this
are
point.
not seeing any stress for MSME. So that's what my take is.
Okay. Yeah. Let me ask you, Tapan, in terms of plans now, as you look forward, what do you have lined up?
So if you look at Shreen, I think when you talked of layoffs, here I'm finding hard to get talent. So it's actually reverse, So I mentioned earlier, India growth story is something you have to look at very long term. It keeps on slugging along, so there'll be spikes up and down, which is there. There are two things we have to be careful about. While all the time we talk about expansion, growth, but we have to put the downside also. Sweating in Davos, not heard of before, that means global warming is there, which means that you see more...
Yes, we've come to 49 degrees in Delhi, so we know.
Now what happens, Shreen, is when you see all this happening, and I do not know, but when I was a kid, I would see a rainy day off once in 3-4 years. They were very exciting for us, to get the paper boat on. Yeah. Today, every 3-4 months, you have floods, all across. The problem is what we're not trying to really take care of is, while the economy would grow, things would go well, but catastrophic events, which destroys completely, would push us back, the common person, way back. and like say health, health expenditure pushes 4% of India's population below poverty, I think we should try and put it downside also very aggressively. The government has done quite a bit in terms of looking at health insurance for all across. My personal feeling is that I would like to push for health insurance for every citizen of India. That is a plan which, as Bajaj Allianz, we try to push that. Second, for catastrophic losses, floods. See, economic loss would be, let's say, 20,000 crores. And the insured loss is 4,000 crores. 16,000 crore is lost of the common person. It's huge. And when you have such occurring events all across, the next thing that we like to work on is how do we protect all this? How do you protect downside in an economy is something which is of a serious concern now. Like, while we do talk a lot about the upside, but downside is protected a lot. And I think as an insurer, that would be one of our key endeavors to protect the downside. So while we as a country keep on growing, we don't fall back when such things happen.
That's an interesting point that you make about protecting the downside. And there's a report that's been commissioned by the Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council. It's not been authored by the PMEAC. It's been commissioned by them, which has talked about something that CII has previously talked about as well, the need for an urban NREGS, an employment guarantee scheme, for instance, or raising minimal wages higher. Do you think that the time for that has come?
See, there are two things to it. When I talk of India's story, and I will look at salaries in India, if I way back, let's say I step back 25 years back, I would see a lot of Indians going to Middle East, to Europe or Ireland. The salary is very high. Today I get CVs from these places, and I look at salaries that are very comparable to what Indian market is paying. I think, so overall salary has moved up. So minimum wages should also move up. I don't think that's an issue which would be something that we should think about. What we should keep on thinking about is 2-3 things. One is how do we keep on supporting ecosystems where growth keeps on moving forward at a grassroots level, where the entrepreneurship happens at grassroots level. I think he's a classic example of building entrepreneurship at a grassroots level. How do we multiply that at multifold is one thing that we should obsess upon. How do you protect downside against these weather calamities and things which happen which upset people a lot? When your employment generation at hyper speed and the way India's economic story is going to happen, that's going to take the India and the country to the next level. I was very happy to see the number of unicorns which happened last year. I think it's in the right direction. We should be just focused on getting these things right as we move forward. And as I said, protect the downside so we don't lose things if something goes wrong at a very hyper speed. That is what we should be looking at. Guaranteeing employment is something which, to my mind, is still a very softer option. Generating employment is what we should be obsessed about. That's how I would think, Shireen.
Right. Ritesh, everyone's talking about the startup ecosystem, and I think 2021 was a record year just in terms of the money that came in, the unicorns that got minted, and so on and so forth. But I think it's fair to say that there has been a fair amount of froth, and I think what the current context is teaching companies is that many of them have grown up in an era of abundance, have not really seen a downturn, and now need to prepare for the possibility of a prolonged downturn. What are the lessons that you're taking away, for instance? I mean, you've been through pain, so you're probably better prepared and better equipped. But post-COVID, the lessons and what more do you intend to take forward?
Sure. Look, I think I'll break it into 3 parts, right? The first is saying that if you look at companies in our segment in travel and tourism, I think we are probably the best prepared to deal with the latest crisis because we are just coming at it with very low base, and there is significant amount of consumer spending that is expected in this segment, and it has been coming in quite strongly as well. So that's a good news. The second bit is, I think clearly there's been a lot of chatter about corporate governance and startups in the recent times. My view is that at a time of slowdown, many people may see it as a trouble. I actually see this as great news because this allows companies to say that this is the next 12 months or 14 months when there will be some challenges, but this is the time to build true character. So for instance, in the times of COVID is when, 2 years back, is when we became a majority independent board company. Decisions started being made in committees. Committees just sound like they make things slower, but they actually make things very agile. They bring a lot of learnings to the management, which otherwise would have been impossible to get. Or for instance, as you may remember, we had some troubles with our hotel owners pre-pandemic. We actually built something.
You still continue to have those troubles. They don't want you to IPO.
No, I think that's, of course, there are some associations with vested interests who may say this, but if you see our broader owner satisfaction levels, it's probably a 2.5 times better. The reason is, for instance, as soon as COVID hit, we set up something that's called the equal partner policy, where we said that here are the 10 things that we will not change with our patrons ever until there are representatives of owners who also join us. Suddenly, governance has gone away from the boardroom to an everyday business decision as well, along with your patrons. So my view is these are things that new companies will learn quite quickly. So I actually am not too worried about it. I think it will be some pain over the next 14 months, but it will be a lot more gain than the pain. When you see 14 months later that the number of companies who are profitable unicorns will grow multifold. You will see unicorns making a positive difference to jobs, as you were mentioning, grow substantially, and also make a bigger difference in the grassroots. You were mentioning about, I actually feel that startups' impact in villages and agri is growing now higher than ever before. Who would have thought, right? Like my company is in the space of tourism, right? Even in my business, I have multiple villages where we've launched rural tourism hubs. And you'll find fascinating, like there's one of our homeowners, Rajesh Bhai, in Ekta Nagar in Gujarat. He's made all through pandemic every month between 50,000 rupees to 1 lakh rupees of earning, because people want to, now that people haven't traveled overseas for a long time. So I think opportunity is immense. It will need to, of course, need some tightrope walking. But I feel that none of the entrepreneurs signed up for doing something easy. We all signed up to do the tough thing and making a positive difference. So you will see entrepreneurs will win out of these tough times.
Well, that is the true test of entrepreneurship, as well as the true test of a business model. And I think for those who didn't have a business model, this perhaps will be the opportunity to put the nuts and bolts in place. But Mr. Khara, we're also here, let's not focus only on the short-term issues and the short-term volatility, but let's talk about the road ahead in terms of the next few years and the mega trends that we should watch out for and be prepared for. From the banking perspective, from the financial services perspective, what do you think needs to be prioritized at this point in time in light of the many changes that have already taken place?
See, from the banking perspective, if at all we look at the economy, from the economy's perspective, the things which are required to be taken care of are the infrastructure. Because infrastructure is something which is actually, there's a lot of efforts which have been put in last 2 years also during the pandemic period. Government has spent a lot of money, and that has actually helped in sort of generating economic activity on the ground. But going forward, I think it is going to be further strengthened, because if at all economy has to stay competitive, and moreover, the international trade levers which we have started exploiting for last year plus, if at all we have to continue doing that, we have to ensure that there is enough competitiveness within the economy, and for that infrastructure is going to play a very, very major role. Apart from that, the journey for digitization is actually quite promising, and that I'm sure will go forward and will actually change the complexion of the commerce, trade and commerce, and also for many corporates also. The third very important thing which we have to really work on is how to leverage analytics, for multiple things. It is not merely for sourcing businesses. It is also for how to manage the risk better. What was indicated by Mr. Jindal for about the risk management. I would say that today in the country we don't have enough reinsurance capacity with the kind of risk which you are getting exposed to. So I think if at all we can put the analytics to use, perhaps our ability to really plan out well and manage the risk also enhances. So I think as the economy gets opened up, it is going to be exposed to the global volatility also. So we as a country, we have been in the past, we have been internally focused, but we have to now, since our stature is becoming big, we are actually becoming one of the leading economies of the world. So we will have a situation where we'll have to be mindful of the global, the fluctuations and how it is going to affect the Indian economy, and how do we have to insulate the corporates and our large entities from such kind of risk. And not only insulate, but to manage and navigate the risk. I think that capability will have to be really built into the corporates in the country. And I'm sure we are on the right track, and hopefully we'll get to see a significant impact of these initiatives which have been taken in the past in maybe another 2 to 5 years time.
Tapan, let me ask you, we saw a marquee event in the insurance space with the LIC listing just going through. But, for the insurance space in general and from an investment perspective as well, FDI caps across most sectors, including insurance, have been liberalized over the years quite significantly. Do you see despite the global volatility, do you believe that we will continue to draw in FDI?
It's an interesting question, Shreen. So let me take you back to 1970s. You had 100 companies in the general insurance space, no? When you go to 56, we already have 300, 400 companies. Today, we only have 50 companies.
Yeah.
If you look at, let's say, a UK market, there are 1,000 companies. So if you have 50 companies in a country like India, and you have a smaller country like 1,000 companies, and in India itself, before 70s, you had over 100 odd companies. So why would you not see more companies come in? I think that is the first question. The second question is, if you look at the penetration in India, it is still 1/4 of the world.
Yeah.
So even if you do nothing, you'll have double-digit growth happening for the industry, continuously for years together. An industry which will give you double-digit growth, will create so much employment, which has so much to do. Why should there not be investment coming in? I think that is the question that we have to ask us. So I'm very, very hopeful about it. I see the industry really blooming. If I look at the past 20 years also, it has a double-digit growth. Even in worst time also, it had growth which is happening there. So if you look at industry, it shall have a double-digit growth for the next 20, 30 years. Such huge potential, such huge market to be opened up. So I'm actually very hopeful of a lot of companies coming in, and more the merrier. Actually, I'm looking forward to it.
More the merrier. What about your own partner in terms of being able to hike stake?
I think that is something you should ask the shareholders. A very good question, but the wrong person.
Okay, Ritesh. So the opportunities that you're going to be focused on?
So a few, right? The first thing is, as you know, with COVID getting COVID impact, one of the other things we did was we focused, right? So we said we'll only focus on India, Indonesia and Northern Europe, and that's what we've been focused on. We would like to go deeper. So for instance, recently we announced the acquisition of Direct Booker here in Europe. Last year we announced the acquisition of TUI's vacation homes business here in Europe. So we're continuing to go deeper. That's the first thing. Second is making sure that we continue to invest more on technology. We have seen the value of it, right? So for instance, with our patrons earlier, we used to settle their accounts once a month. Now we settle it twice a week. That has led to improved satisfaction. On our consumer side, being able to bring more and more options to them, both by number of storefronts as well as consumer choices, something that we're going to be very focused on. And last, but one of the most important ones, is to make sure that we hold our margins and operating efficiencies. Because good news is, as business is coming back, all the additional top line with margin and operating cost holding will flow through to the bottom line, and hence we'll be able to improve on our EBITDA margins, which hopefully I can come and talk about to you in the next time.
All right. Well, gentlemen,
thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us. We wish you the very best of luck. Thanks for joining us here at the CII CNBC-TV18 Davos Roundtable. Appreciate your time. We will take a break. There's a lot more coming up here. From Davos, we'll be joined by the Oil Minister, Hardeep Puri, on the big decisions announced by the government in just a moment. Stay with us. We're back in a minute.